Cisco is working to power an inclusive future for all. Access to information, security, equality, and fairness. Cisco, the bridge to possible. Learn more at cisco.com/go/bridge to possible.
Happening now, U.S. military leaders testify about missteps in the Afghanistan withdrawal, appearing to contradict President Biden on a key point. And the nation's top general defends his controversial call to China during President Trump's final days in office. Also tonight, divided Democrats are heading toward a showdown over the Biden agenda as Speaker Pelosi backtracks and progressives revolt. I'll talk with the chair of the Progressive Caucus about Democrats' desperate moves to salvage their priorities as the clock ticks toward a possible government shutdown. And Pfizer takes an important step toward COVID-19 vaccinations for younger children, submitting new data to the FDA. But why did the company hold off on asking for emergency use authorization? We want to welcome our viewers here in the United States and around the world. I'm Wolf Blitzer. You're in the Situation Room. We begin with very revealing testimony by top U.S. military leaders, senators asking tough questions about the chaotic U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and about the reported actions of General Mark Milley during the final days of the Trump presidency. Our Pentagon correspondent Oren Lieberman is covering it all for us.
The Pentagon's top military leaders making clear their views on Afghanistan were heard, but not followed.
I recommended that we maintain 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. I also have a view that the withdrawal of those forces would lead inevitably to the collapse of the Afghan military forces and eventually the Afghan government.
Yes, so I understand that. And General Milley, I assume you agree with that in terms of the recommendation of 2,500?
What I said in my opening statement and the memoranda that I wrote back in the fall of 2020 remained consistent, and I do agree with that.
Republicans seized on the contradiction between those views and what President Joe Biden said in August about the advice he was given by military leaders.
And they wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops.
No, they didn't. It was split. That wasn't true. That wasn't true.
They didn't tell you that they wanted troops to stay?
No, not in terms of whether we were going to get out in a time frame, all troops. They didn't argue against that.
Is that true?
Republican Senator Tom Cotton went after Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin on this point.
It's a simple question, Secretary Austin. He said no senior military leader advised him to leave a small troop presence behind. Is that true or not? Did these officer and General Miller's recommendations get to the president personally?
Their input was received by the president and considered by the president, for sure.
Lawmakers grilled top military leaders on the rapid collapse of the Afghan military and the failure of the U.S. to see it coming after pulling U.S. advisors 3 years ago.
When you pull the advisors out of the units, you no longer can assess things like leadership and will. We can count all the planes, trucks, and automobiles and cars and machine guns and everything else. We can count those from space and all the other kind of intel assets. But you can't measure the human heart with a machine. You got to be there.
Joint Chiefs Chairman General Mark Milley said it was an open question whether an evacuation that moved 124,000 people should have begun earlier. But ultimately, it was a State Department call.
You and I have discussed this. Would you use the term extraordinary success for what took place in August in Afghanistan?
That's the non-combatant evacuation, and I think one of the other senators said it very well. It was a logistical success, but a strategic failure.
The Pentagon knew the Afghan government and armed forces critically relied on U.S. military and financial support. What surprised everyone was the speed at which it all fell apart in a matter of days, not months.
We certainly did not plan against a collapse of a government in 11 days. We helped build a state, Mr. Chairman, but we could not forge a nation.
The Biden administration defended the president's decision not to heed the advice of his generals.
What the American people should know is the president is always going to welcome a range of advice. He asks for candor, he asks for directness, and in any scenario, he's not looking for a bunch of yes men and women. And what that means is that ultimately, he's going to have to make the decision about what's in the best interest of the United States.
Senator Cotton responding to learning President Biden didn't follow the military's advice.
If all this is true, General Milley, why haven't you resigned?
This country doesn't want generals figuring out what orders we are going to accept and do or not. That's not our job. The principle of civilian control of the military is absolute. It's critical. to this republic.
Milley also addressed revelations in the book Peril about the final days of the Trump administration. Authors Bob Woodward and Robert Costa wrote that on a phone call with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Milley agreed that the president was crazy. Today, Milley said he did not make that assessment.
I am not qualified to determine the mental health of the President of the United States.
Milley was also worried, the authors wrote, that Trump would start a conflict with China to distract from his election loss. Milley defended the two calls he had with his Chinese counterpart in late October and January 8th after the Capitol insurrection.
My task at that time was to de-escalate. My message again was consistent. Stay calm, steady, and de-escalate. We are not going to attack you.
Milley says the calls were coordinated with Trump administration officials, and he personally informed Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows about the calls.
Some Republican senators called for the resignation of Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin, as well as Chairman of the Joint Chiefs General Mark Milley. And that's certainly not going to happen. I think that's apparent at this point, but there is an open question about what level of accountability there will be. The Dutch foreign minister resigned because of the Afghanistan withdrawal. The British foreign secretary was demoted because of the withdrawal, but there's been nothing near that level of accountability to this point in the U.S. government. Wolf?
Oren Lieberman reporting from the Pentagon. Oren, thank you very much. Let's dig deeper right now. Joining us, our Chief National Security Correspondent, Jim Sciutto, our Chief International Correspondent, Clarissa Ward, she's in Kabul, our Special Correspondent, Jamie Gangel, and retired Brigadier General Mark Kimmett, the former Assistant Secretary of State for Political Military Affairs. Jim, what do you make of the level of candor we heard from these top Pentagon officials?
At times, biting candor to the point where they're willing to contradict the telling of this withdrawal as told by the White House and the president. Now, I reached out to the White House today to ask them how they square that circle. Their story is that when Biden said that no general recommended 2,500 troops, in effect, he was saying that no general had the position or military leader that those 2,500 troops would stabilize the country for the long term. The fact is, though, we've listened to a lot of comments from the president and this administration over the last several months that projected unanimity on this decision that was not there. And you heard from Milley and you heard from McKenzie say that in very clear terms today. We recommended 2,500. The president did not accept that recommendation. The other piece of candor I thought was consequential was Milley contradicting again what has been an administration line, that this evacuation was in reality an extraordinary success. But he made clear, yes, from an operational perspective, in the circumstances that we were dealt, but strategically a failure. Now, to be clear, he's talking not just about the decisions of this president, but prior presidents as well. But this is the president of the day, and he's the one who made the final decision to withdraw.
Well, let me ask General Kimmett, what did you make of the fact that these generals were saying that they wanted at least 2,500 U.S. troops to remain in Afghanistan? They thought that would stabilize the situation, at least temporarily, and the president rejected that.
Yeah, as I mentioned to Jim this morning, 2,500 soldiers is a big number when they bring a lot of capability. Look what has happened in Iraq. In 2014, we put 2,500 American troops back on the ground, enabling the Iraqi security forces to, in fact, defeat ISIS inside the country. When you've got guys on the ground that can bring in airstrikes, can bring in logistics, can bring in intelligence, that's the backbone that was needed in Iraq to turn the situation around. And my view is the same thing would happen in Afghanistan.
Yeah, but obviously it didn't happen in Afghanistan. You know, Clarissa, you're there in Kabul for us. The Joint Chiefs Chairman says the enemy is in charge in Kabul right now. You're there on the ground. Is he right? What does he mean for Afghans? What does that mean for Afghans?
Well, Wolf, you know the old adage, one man's terrorist is another man's freedom fighter. And I do think it's really important to be transparent about the fact that there are large parts of Afghanistan who are delighted that the U.S. has left, who are delighted that the Taliban is in charge, who are happy to see an end to drone strikes and airstrikes. And it is important to note as well that security situation is better now, right? There isn't as much fighting. But for countless other Afghans, particularly those living in cities, particularly for women, there are huge concerns and honestly, a desperate panic as they stare down the barrel at an uncertain future. The Taliban is treating this as a transitional period. They're trying to adapt a more pragmatic tone, in large part because they want recognition from the international community. They want to see aid unfrozen. This country is on the precipice of an economic crisis, but already we're starting to see girls can't go to school right now after the age of 6th grade. Women can't go to university. They can't teach in university until a proper Islamic environment is created, whatever that means. And then we've also seen a return to the sort of medieval justice that we've come to expect from the Taliban in the 1990s. Over the course of the weekend, 4 bodies hung in public in the city of Herat. These were apparently, according to the Taliban, kidnappers who had been killed in a raid to stop them from carrying out criminal activity. And this was some kind of a warning to ordinary people. So naturally, a lot of people very scared of what the future holds.
You know, Jamie, it was very interesting. I thought General Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, he disputed the reporting from Bob Woodward and Robert Costa in their brand new book about what he thought about former President Trump's mental capability. You've done a lot of reporting on this. What did you think?
So I think we should say he disputed it, sort of. He put forth another opinion. Look, General Milley is a blunt guy, but 2 things can be true at the same time. And he ad-libbed part of his statement today, and he made a point about he was not qualified to know what the president's state of mind is. That doesn't mean he didn't have an opinion, and he did not contradict the reporting in Woodward and Costa's book. I think it is fair to say, if you look at all of these books, including Woodward and Costa, General Milley has made it very clear that he thought President Trump was unstable, unpredictable, could go rogue, and that what he wanted to do today was say, look, I was acting within my authority. I didn't overstep a line. On the other hand, he was worried that something could happen. In the book, Speaker Pelosi says, in effect, he's been crazy for a long time. You know he's crazy. And General Milley is quoted as saying, quote, Madam Speaker, I agree with you on everything. And Woodward and Costa stand by that reporting. I would just add, Bob Woodward is known to record a lot of these interviews, and General Milley didn't come out and say he never said that.
And General Milley did confirm he spoke to a lot of, not only Woodward and Costa, right, but a lot of authors in their new books.
Correct.
General Milley, Jim, also admitted that the Afghanistan withdrawal, the way it unfolded, has undermined U.S. credibility. And the adversaries are happy, allies are upset. What does this do for U.S. national security?
Listen, I've heard from European diplomats with our closest allies who are concerned about this very thing. And we know that America's adversaries watch. We know that they watched the Gulf War, made conclusions about American capabilities. They watched America's long involvements in Iraq and Afghanistan, learned about America's vulnerabilities to fighting insurgencies and so on. We know they watched the exit as well. And the question is, does Russia look at U.S. departure from Afghanistan and leaving its allies and say, what does that mean about the eastern members of NATO? What would happen if we meddled in an Estonia again? Would the U.S. react consequentially? An open question. China looks and says, what would happen if we go into Taiwan, which is something that U.S. military leaders are concerned they might do in the next several years. Would the U.S. go to war over Taiwan? I don't know what they'll conclude. We don't know. But it's reasonable to believe that they watched Afghanistan and learned. You know, General Kimmett, as you know, the war on terror continues, although there's no U.S. ground presence in Afghanistan anymore, and presumably al-Qaeda could rebuild over there. Is the U.S. going to learn from the blunders, the mistakes of this 20-year war in Afghanistan? Because it seems like the U.S. didn't learn much from Vietnam either.
Well, I think those are two different things. The issue of the war on terrorism and the mistakes that we made in Afghanistan in many ways are completely different. The mistakes we made in Afghanistan were primarily those that we got in there to win a war, but we stayed in there for the purposes of doing good. And that's incompatible, as we've seen, for 20 years of war. War on terrorism continues. In fact, it may be restarting. Al-Qaeda inevitably is going to go back into Afghanistan. It's inevitably going to find safe haven and sanctuary again.
Yeah, the general said Al-Qaeda is already back in Afghanistan right now. All right, guys, everybody, thank you very, very much. Just ahead, persistent questions about former President Trump's mental health during his final days in office. His former National Security Advisor, John Bolton, he's here in the Situation Room. We'll discuss. And there's new uncertainty tonight surrounding the timetable for young children here in the United States to get COVID-19 vaccine. Stay with us. You're in the Situation Room.
Where will we be in 5 years? In 50 years? Will everyone have access to information and security, to equality and fairness? Cisco has made it its purpose to power an inclusive future for all. Where will we be in 50 years? Let's go see. Between the world and what we make of it, there's a bridge. Cisco, the bridge to possible. Learn more at cisco.com/go/bridge to possible.
The universe has a sense of humor, especially when it comes to cars. As soon as a warranty expires, things start to break and those repairs are no longer covered. CarShield picks up where your warranty leaves off, with service plans that cover expensive repairs. Coverage that could save you thousands of dollars. They pay your favorite mechanic or dealership directly, making the entire process fast and easy. Get a free quote by calling 800-416-6522 or visit carshield.com.
We're getting to reaction to testimony by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. We heard General Mark Milley defend his actions near the end of the Trump presidency and address questions about the former commander-in-chief's state of mind. We're joined now by the former Trump National Security Advisor, John Bolton. He's the author of the book, The Room Where It Happened, a White House memoir. Ambassador, thank you so much for coming in. What do you make of General Milley's saying he wasn't qualified to determine former President Trump's mental health? You worked in the Trump White House. You worked with Trump for a long time. Is that something that officials like you and others actually had to grapple with?
Well, I didn't think Trump was fit to be president. I've explained the reasons why in the book, and I think others could see the same issue. But I think for Milley, with all due respect, I think what he did and the controversy surrounding it is kind of overwrought. I think it's actually very undramatic. The book says that, and Milley said today, that he was reading intelligence that the Chinese were worried that in this confusion and so on, they would be subject to a wag the dog military attack, or at least that was possible. Now, I have to say, quite apart from Donald Trump's state of mind, if the state of mind of the Chinese leadership was about to make that miscalculation, it was nothing more than common sense for several communications to be made to the Chinese, including a Milley to his counterpart conversation, to say, don't believe what you read in the newspapers. So those who say that Milley violated the civilian control of the military, undercut the chain of command, betrayed the president on the one hand, and those who say Milley saved the country from a psychopath on the other are both wrong. Milley did his duty.
Well, do you think former President Trump was mentally unstable in all the dealings you had? You say he was unfit to be president, but what about his mental capability?
Well, I didn't think very much of him. His capabilities. I thought he saw everything through the prism of what would benefit Donald Trump. And I think in those last days, you could see that at work, how he treated Mike Pence with respect to January the 6th and a range of other things. It was good to be prudent, and I think there were a number of high-level officials who were doing that. But the idea that somehow there was a mental breakdown in the White House, I'd say the same thing Milley did. I'm not a shrink. I can't judge that.
You heard Republican Senator Hawley say that Milley should resign because even during this withdrawal from Afghanistan and all of that, he was still talking to a whole bunch of reporters. What was your reaction to that?
Look, everybody in Washington talks to reporters, as you well know. And I think Milley could have felt that there was history at stake here with these authors writing these books, and he wanted to make sure that his version of it was out there. The idea that somehow that distracted from his duties on Afghanistan is just foolish.
You heard these Pentagon officials testify today, and they're all under oath, that they thought that Doha agreement that the Trump administration negotiated with the Taliban, giving a date certain for U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan, was a horrible decision by then President Trump. What did you think? Because the Afghan government wasn't involved in that. The allies weren't involved in that. That was strictly a deal between the Trump administration and the Taliban.
I think they were exactly right. I think Trump is the root cause of this failure by negotiating with the terrorist group. You know, our policy normally is we don't negotiate with hostage takers, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and we certainly don't negotiate with terrorists to the exclusion of the government we created. We, by the Trump administration, Trump and Mike Pompeo, delegitimized the Afghan government, in effect de-recognized it, and contributed very significantly to the collapse of morale in the government and in the Afghan army.
And we see what's happening in Afghanistan right now, 20 years of U.S. involvement with the NATO allies.
I think this is changing the debate from, well, we want to get out, but we didn't like the execution of the withdrawal, as the American people see the consequences of the withdrawal, the return of the terrorist threat, the negative reaction by our allies, the advantage our opponents may take of it. They will see that it's not just the execution, it was the decision itself that was wrong.
Ambassador Bolton, thanks very much for coming in.
Glad to be with you.
Coming up, President Biden is facing a crucial test as Democrats clash over key pieces of his agenda. Just ahead, I'll ask the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus about the status of these negotiations. Plus, former President Barack Obama officially breaks ground on his presidential center in Chicago. Stay with us. You're in the Situation Room.
Angie's List is now Angie, and caring for your home just got easier. Whether you need help with routine maintenance or a dream remodel, Angie makes it easy to see reviews, compare quotes, and connect with top local pros who can get the job done right. Plus, you can see upfront pricing and instantly book hundreds of projects. No phone tag, just the work you need done at a time that works for you. Angie's got your to-do list covered from start to finish. Book your next home project today at Angie.com. That's ANGI.com.
This podcast is supported by First Republic Bank. Think about it. When was the last time you had really great service? When someone made you feel like a VIP by remembering your name, caring about your goals, and anticipating your every need. First Republic is committed to just this kind of client experience, providing not good, not great, but extraordinary service. How do they do it? You'll work with your very own personal banker, a single point of contact, who will be there to guide you through everything from switching banks to planning for your future. To discover the difference extraordinary service can make, visit firstrepublic.com today to learn more. That's firstrepublic.com. Member FDIC, Equal Housing Lender.
Just in, President Biden is canceling his travel plans to Chicago tomorrow as he desperately tries to salvage his endangered agenda from Democratic infighting. Our chief White House correspondent, Caitlin Collins, got details for us. Caitlin, the president met with key senators today at the White House once again. What's the holdup right now? Was there any progress made?
Well, clearly not enough if the president is canceling this trip to Chicago tomorrow, which was supposed to be a pretty brief trip on vaccines. But he clearly feels the need to stay here at the White House as he is spearheading these negotiations, including, of course, those two meetings that you noted that he had today with two moderate Democratic senators who are really at the center of all of this. That is Senator Joe Manchin and Senator Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. And when Manchin emerged from his meeting with the president, Wolf, that he said lasted about 90 minutes, he said he did not make any commitments to the president when it comes to the price tag of that much bigger reconciliation package. That's the one that Democrats are arguing over what exactly it's going to look like, given it's expected to be a massive package that has to deal with, it's a social policy package that also deals with climate change. And that is something they have not agreed to. And he also said they did not make any commitments when it comes to the timeline for all of this. And that is another very crucial aspect here. Senator Sinema, when she left her meeting, also was pretty quiet on what she had discussed with the president, though, of course, we know what the White House and other Democrats really want to know is what is the number that they are willing to commit to. And that is something that is deeply frustrating their progressive colleagues who want to know and want to have a firm commitment from those two moderate senators before they vote on the $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure package that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has now said she is going to bring for a vote on Thursday. And Wolf, we should know and remind viewers that that comes after she reversed course last night on something that she has been saying, the president has been saying, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer has been saying for for several weeks and several months now, which is that those two bills must go together. She now says they are separating them. And of course, that is something, Wolf, that is going to be a big concern because progressives say they will vote no on the bipartisan infrastructure bill if they don't have a commitment or if they don't have an actual vote on the bigger package, because they say essentially they are scared that they will lose leverage if they don't have that. And we should note, Wolf, a sign of the divisions here, Senator Bernie Sanders is now encouraging those House Democrats to vote no on the bipartisan deal if they don't have a firm commitment on the much bigger package first.
Okay, Caitlin, thank you very much. Caitlin Collins over at the White House. I want to get reaction right now from the chair of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, Democratic Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining us. Your fellow Progressive Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib says Speaker Pelosi's move to separate these two bills, vote on the infrastructure bill on Thursday, in Rashida Tlaib's words, is a betrayal. Is that how you would describe it as well, a betrayal?
Well, Wolf, thanks so much for having me on. I have been working very closely with the Speaker over the last several days, several months, and the Speaker is really clear that we have to deliver both these bills. She is also very clear that if the bipartisan infrastructure bill comes up for a vote, that it would fail. We have been clear that our members need to deliver the entirety of the president's agenda. And frankly, we have 96% of all the Democrats in the House and the Senate who agree with us that we're ready to go forward on the bill as it's written, the Build Back Better agenda and the infrastructure bill. And there's 4% of the Democratic caucus that is saying they don't like it. But let's be clear, this is an agenda that is the president's Build Back Better agenda and is also the American people's Build Back Better agenda. 70% of Americans support giving child care to people, making sure that that's a universal thing that we offer to people. Paid leave. I mean, what is in the Build Back Better package? Paid leave, child care, housing so we can house the unhoused across the country, and create good jobs through building more housing, making sure that we are addressing health care in the midst of a health care crisis, making sure that we are addressing climate change, Wolf. And our position, and of course immigration, our position is we are not going to leave these things behind for a much smaller bill. People might remember roads and bridges. I get that. That's great. It's important. We're going to vote for that bill. But people will really remember how their life is transformed when they have childcare, when they have paid leave, and when they can protect the planet.
If the infrastructure bill, the $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill, does come to the floor on Thursday for a vote without any action, any formal action yet on the reconciliation package, the $3.5 trillion reconciliation package, how will you vote?
I will not be able to support that, and neither will the majority of our members. And let's just be clear, we are ready to support that if people stick to the deal we originally made. That was the deal coming out of the Senate. It's why 12 Democratic senators said that, and signed a letter recently saying that was the commitment they were given, is they vote for the bipartisan infrastructure bill, and then we in the House finish the reconciliation bill with the Senate, agree on that package, pass that package, and then we would pass the infrastructure bill. So, this is too important to leave people behind. We are not going to do that.
Are you at all concerned, Congresswoman, that you might be letting the perfect, in other words, both of these bills, be the enemy of the good? And there's no guarantee the $3.5 trillion reconciliation budget bill will pass, given the opposition of 2 Democratic senators.
Wolf, the main part of the president's Build Back Better agenda that he came and delivered to us, to Congress in February, the main part of that agenda that we ran on as Democrats to get the House, the Senate, and the White House is contained within the Build Back Better agenda. So 70% of the entire Build Back Better agenda is in the Build Back Better Act. And if we don't pass that, then we are saying to people, sorry, we promised, but we're only going to deliver you a tiny sliver of things, and we're going to go back on our word to you as voters and also as Democrats. And so, no, I'm not concerned about the perfect being the enemy of the good. I'm concerned that 4% of the Democratic caucus is, in both the House and the Senate, is not coming to the table to negotiate in good faith what we thought we had already negotiated. But listen, we're happy to continue. We're working very hard to get to agreement. And we really believe that this is a great unity moment for us all to come together. For the people who don't love the infrastructure bill, because I have some of those folks in my caucus who actually think it's a negative bill, in terms of carbon emissions, but to get them, every single one of them has been an adult in the room and said they're ready to vote for the infrastructure bill, even though they don't like it, as long as we pass the reconciliation bill. So let's bring everybody together. Let's get this done. Let's deliver both bills to the president's desk and go home and start talking about transformational investments we've made to the American people.
Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, you got a lot going on right now. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Wolf.
Just ahead, Pfizer takes a step toward getting COVID vaccines for children ages 5 to 11, but holds off on an official request of the FDA. When will young Americans, these kids, get protection from the pandemic? There are new questions tonight about the timetable for authorizing COVID-19 vaccinations for younger children. Let's bring in CNN medical analyst Dr. Lena Wen, the former Baltimore City Health Commissioner and author of the important new book entitled Lifelines, A Doctor's Journey in the Fight for Public Health. Dr. Wen, thank you so much for joining us. As you know, Pfizer submitted COVID-19 vaccine data on children ages 5 to 11 to the FDA today, but did not request emergency use authorization for the vaccine for the kids. Does that make sense to you?
Well, the ball is entirely in Pfizer's court at this point. I mean, I'm glad that they submitted something to the FDA, but at this point, we really need them to submit for emergency use authorization. There was this sense that we could ideally get shots into arms of kids in the 5 to 11-year-old range by the end of October. Well, that's coming up really soon because when you look at how long it took between submitting the application and authorization for the 12 to 15-year-old group, that took about a month. And so Pfizer really needs to get in their application right now if we are to meet that end of October deadline.
A new poll, Dr. Wen, finds 79% of adults here in the United States say COVID-19 will persist in the U.S. as something we learn to live with, similar to the flu, for example, while just 14% of those polled think the virus will be eliminated. Where do you stand?
I think it's hard to prognosticate exactly what's going to happen long term. I do think that medium term, as in the next few years, when there is still so much coronavirus, not just in the US, but also around the world, we are going to have to figure out how to live with it. Having vaccines for younger children will be very important because otherwise parents are living as if they're unvaccinated, trying to protect their young kids. Also, getting rapid tests available, ideally free to all Americans, that would also be a game changer. The UK actually distributes for everybody in the UK to get rapid tests free of charge twice a week. Now imagine if we could do that, if all students and teachers and workers, even family members can take a rapid test before seeing one another. I think that would really change how we think about living with COVID.
2,000 Americans on average are dying here in the United States still every single day, according to the Johns Hopkins University, the same number as last week. The NBA star LeBron James announced today he is vaccinated, admitting he was initially skeptical about getting the shot. How important is it for people to hear from folks like LeBron James, for example, on this?
I think it's really important. We know that the messenger matters as much or even more than the message itself. And I also think there's something very compelling about hearing people who change their minds, who said, initially, I didn't want to get the vaccine for whatever reason, but now I'm doing it for the following reasons. Of course, I wish that LeBron James would go even further and encourage other people to get vaccinated, but I think it's good that he's telling his own story and explaining why getting the vaccine is something that protects him and his family. It's safe and effective, and of course, all Americans who are eligible to be vaccinated should get vaccinated right now.
They certainly should. Dr. Lena Wen, thank you as usual for joining us. Appreciate it very much. Coming up, we have new information coming in on a camping trip taken by Brian Laundrie and his family shortly before his fiancée, Gabby Petito, was officially reported missing. This just in, CNN has confirmed new details about the whereabouts of Brian Laundrie and his family soon after he returned from a road trip without his fiancée, Gabby Petito, who was later found dead in Wyoming. According to officials, the Laundrie family went camping together in early September, just days before Petito was reported missing. CNN's Athena Jones has all the latest developments.
Gabby Petito's family held a news conference today on Long Island, New York, taking the time to focus on remembering Petito and the light they say she brought to the world.
I just hope that people are inspired by her.
Her family also said they are starting a foundation in her name.
We're just hoping that through our tragedy with losing Gabby, that in the future that some good can come out of it.
This same type of heightened awareness should be continued for everyone. Everyone.
This as a local law enforcement official says the FBI is scaling back its search for Petito's fiancé, Brian Laundrie. For more than a week, teams have searched through the 25,000-acre Carlton Reserve near Northport, Florida, after his parents told investigators on September 17th that he went missing on September 14th. Today, the Petito family renewed calls for Laundrie to turn himself in.
The Laundries did not help us find Gabby. They're sure is not going to help us find Brian. For Brian, we're asking you to turn yourself in to the FBI or the nearest law enforcement agency.
People have been gathering outside the Laundrie's home, some leaving flowers for Petito, some yelling at Laundrie's parents.
What were you thinking helping your son? What were you thinking? Huh? You guys have blood on your hands too.
Monday night, the Laundrie family lawyer, Stephen Bertolino, released a statement about the search, saying they don't know where he is. And the speculation by the public and some in the press that the parents assisted Brian in leaving the family home or in avoiding arrest on a warrant that was issued after Brian had already been missing for several days is just wrong. The search for Laundrie ramped up after authorities found Petito's remains on September 19th in Wyoming's Bridger-Teton National Forest. A coroner ruled her death a homicide.
Gabby Petito never goes outside.
Laundrie and Petito had set off on a cross-country road trip in her van in June, posting regularly on social media sites like YouTube. But Laundrie returned home in Petito's van without her on September 1st. Her family reported her missing 10 days later. Today, her family said they will continue their fight for justice, even taking the time to show off tattoos inspired by Petito.
We all had them done last night. We all did it together.
And we now know the Laundrie family stayed at a campground about 75 miles away from their home in early September. County officials confirming Laundrie's mother, Roberta, was checked in at the Fort DeSoto campground in Pinellas County from September 6th through September 8th. And the Laundrie family attorney also confirming that Brian and his family were at that campground during that time and left together. So we're getting a few more details about what was going on before Brian Laundrie himself went missing.
All right, Athena, thank you very much for that update. Athena Jones reporting. Just ahead, disturbing news out of North Korea, where officials now claim they've successfully tested a hypersonic missile. We have details of a potentially groundbreaking development for Kim Jong-un's missile program. Breaking news, North Korea claims to have successfully tested a hypersonic missile, a move clearly designed to rattle its neighbors and provoke the United States. Our Brian Todd is tracking the story.
North Korea's aggressive young dictator is back to tweaking, agitating, clamoring for the West's attention, and getting it. North Korea's news agency claims Kim Jong-un's military has test-fired a hypersonic missile, which can travel several times faster than the speed of sound and has a warhead that detaches and glides. That was just minutes before North Korea's envoy to the UN spoke to the General Assembly, accusing the U.S. of, quote, antagonizing Pyongyang, blasting the U.S.-South Korean military alliance, and making an implied threat of his own.
We have been very much accustomed to the U.S. military threat, and we know well how to deal with the U.S., the most hostile country.
After a period of relative calm, military tensions on the Korean peninsula have recently been boiling. This is North Korea's third missile test this month, following another ballistic missile test in mid-September and tests of long-range cruise missiles before that. South Korea tested a submarine-launched ballistic missile on September 16th and is deploying a 3,000-ton sub capable of firing it.
On the peninsula, it's clear there's arms racing dynamics going on. North Korea is signaling that its missile arsenal is moving to sea, so South Korea is doing the same. That means that both countries will, in a crisis, be looking in many different directions. That increases the risk of miscalculation and increases the risk that an accident could occur.
The blur of activity on the peninsula in recent weeks includes a bizarre parade through Kim Il-sung Square in Pyongyang, featuring a hazmat squad, a canine unit, horses, And at the stroke of midnight, an image that got North Korea watchers into a lather. Kim Jong-un in a tailored, light-colored suit, looking strikingly thinner than he had a few months ago.
I see no threat to the stability of North Korea or to his rule of North Korea, except the sort of health problems that have run in his family over the years. And he probably knows that, and that may be one of the reasons why he's doing his best to stay in fighting trim, so to speak.
Kim was even shown in propaganda footage appearing to enjoy a bright green drink with a twisty straw. The visuals, the missile tests, the bombast at the UN signal a reemergence of Kim Jong-un on the world stage. But what's his calculation?
I think the message is that North Korea is prepared to talk, but on its terms. And those terms include a desire to talk about what they describe as South Korean and U.S. hostility. And they're not particularly interested in talking about what the United States wants to talk about, and that is, of course, denuclearization. The North Koreans have made it very clear that they're not going down that path.
And again, the breaking news tonight, North Korea has just claimed that the missile it test-fired several hours ago is a hypersonic missile which can travel several times the speed of sound. The North Koreans say this missile also has a warhead that can detach and glide on its own. Now, what makes this missile really concerning now is that these missiles can maneuver very unpredictably and can avoid certain defenses, Wolf. So the U.S. and South Korea now have to figure out what to do about it.
Yeah, this is significant. Brian Todd reporting for us. Thank you, Brian Todd, very much. And that's it for me. Thanks for watching. Aaron Burnett Out Front starts right now.
Where will we be in 5 years? In 50 years? Will everyone have access to information and security, to equality and fairness? Cisco has made it its purpose to power an inclusive future for all. Where will we be in 50 years? Let's go see. Between the world and what we make of it, there's a bridge. Cisco, the bridge to possible. Learn more at cisco.com/go/bridge to possible.